Welcome to Eating Enlightenment, the show that explores individual transformation stories around food, eating, body, mind, and healing. In particular, giving exploration towards the cognitive, the thoughts, the mental paradigms, the ability to reconnect with your body, the tools and strategies that work, and just having some fun along the way. I'm Jared, and long story short, I struggled with food. I was a wrestler. I became freaking miserable. I became a monk because I was so miserable. And up in the mountains, got some meditation goodness. And now I'm all about spreading the mindful vibe. And my role in this podcast is to simply explore, ask great questions, and stay in the present moment with my guest, Maryann Jacobsen, who is an amazing resource on family, health, and nutrition, and eating, especially eating through various stages of life, starting, for example, with toddler, being a picky eater, what happens when your toddler stops eating, because actually that's pretty normal. As they slow down their growth, their eating will probably slow down as well. So if you have a kid and you're wondering, why is my kid no longer such a great eater? Well, Maryann has some amazing answers for you. She's devoted her career, her life, really. She's a mom, and she writes about this stuff, and she practices what she preaches with her own children, and she shares her journey. And I'm giggling right now because it's such an authentic, it's such a useful, it's such a great conversation. So I'm excited to hear what you think about it. Without further ado, let's dive into today's episode.
So why are you passionate about this field?
Well, I'm passionate because, I got into nutrition when I was after high school, and it changed my life. And then, I went through and I became an RD, and I wasn't really sure where I wanted to focus. I tried different things, and then I had a job where I had to write, and I really loved writing. And so that kind of eventually got me to when you write, you want to be passionate, right? So after I had kids, I just really didn't know a lot about child nutrition. And so I dove into the research. I started a blog, and as my kids grew, I really just wanted them to be healthy and happy, and I wanted them to have a healthy relationship with food. Just, I'd seen so many people, and I had struggles too, when I was younger. So, I think, different developmental stages, we don't know a lot about them. Kids, we definitely do, like in the literature, but parents don't always know. So I wanted to let them know, like, you're a picky eater, there's a reason for it. It's not, and if you really start having this power with food, then that child, they grow up, their relationship with food can be hurt instead of, doing more positive, understanding it's normal and that there's things they can do that research shows that helps. So yeah, I have to really want to find the information, and I kind of dig pretty deep, and,
Yeah, it's coming like your passion for this is a mixture of your career, your family, your own struggles that you're going through raising your own kids. And we'll get into the picky eater stages. I wanted to hear about your first blog entry, like when you first started blogging, or were you more of a book writer instead of a blogger?
I started off blogging in 2009, Raise Healthy Eaters. Now it's under my name, but you can still get there through Raise Healthy Eaters. And I don't know, once a week, I think, I'd put up a blog, and my son was just born, my second child, and I was like, I don't know how I did it, and I was working part-time. But yeah, I started blogging, and then that led to my first book, which was traditionally published and I wrote with a pediatric dietitian, Jill Castle, called Fearless Feeding. And I felt like when I was learning all this about starting solids, and that there wasn't really an up-to-date book available. A lot of them were kind of older. Ellen Satter has some good books. We just wanted something that really kind of covered everything. So we wrote kind of this Bible. It's called Fearless Feeding, How to Raise Healthy Eaters from High Chair to High School. So it kind of covers, everything. And it's actually used as a text in some colleges because it's really like good for anyone who's interested in child development. It explains, the what, the why, and the how of feeding. Because it really, if you're dealing with adults, right, it's not like their relationship with food starts at adulthood. It actually starts when they're born and how they're fed. How, are they encouraged to finish their formula, or are they like, it just really, it all starts, you know,
Yeah,
born.
absolutely. And so like the what, the why, and the how, is that
Hmm.
for a specific age group for the young kids, or these are three what, why, and how can apply all throughout life?
Yeah, it's all throughout. Even adulthood, we have we talk about in that book. So the why is kind of your development and how that impacts nutrition. How is how you're fed or how you eat. So an adult, it would be, sitting at the table, being
Mm,
mindful or not, and then what is really the nutritional needs,
mm.
uh, and understanding those.
Could you
So
help me understand the why? I feel like I understand the what and the how. The what is like
I was
what you're
just
eating, and the how is, whether you're eating at a table, or if you're at the high chair with the kids sit in with the placemat in front of them. The why was the developmental stage. Is that what you said?
yeah. So for especially for kids, you understanding, what they need at that stage, why they're acting the way they are, like the
Mm,
picky eating we talked about. Developing a bond with your infant, being in sync with them. So and understanding why, because they're developing an attachment with their caregiver. When they have a close attachment, and food is one way we interact. You're feeding 6, 7 times a day when you first start solids. So, and breastfeeding or bottle feeding. So it's one way, really important way that we, interact with our young
mm,
children. So the why is really important, when you're a child or adolescent. And also puberty is the second biggest growth spurt. And, it's important that kids then begin, they're old enough to understand what's going on. So I wrote a book for girls. I'd like to write a book for boys eventually. So they understand what's going on,
mm,
with their own body and what it needs. It's
mm,
important that you start understanding that.
mm.
And then when we're an adult, it's important to kind of be able to look back. Like if we have certain, let's say we grew up and we were really restricted from sweets. And then as an adult, you really like, overeat sweets. Well, you can kind of make a connection.
See,
Sometimes we say, oh, I just have no willpower, but maybe it's kind of what you learned growing up. And that if you learn that, you can learn a different way. So a
mm,
lot of times this addiction kind of messages, I think, just they don't do very, people just feel like they have to
yeah,
not eat food or, but if you look back at your childhood, then you can really, and I did that too when I work with adults, is like a lot of them that had challenges, they had to clean their plate. So they didn't learn so they still did that as an adult and had problems with that. Or there's one client was a really picky eater and the parents took him to the doctor and just like push food. And then
mm,
eventually as he got older, he just overate because
mm,
it was such an issue. And so,
mm.
a lot of times how we are as adults, you know, is related to when we were children,
My
you know.
own journey has through therapy and has been largely attachment based. I had
Mhm.
no clue about attachment theory before this, but I was like way socially awkward, and because I'd have all these emotions, and first of all, I didn't know how to feel the emotions in my body,
Mhm.
and then I probably have these thoughts too, and I didn't know like why I was having these thoughts, but understanding my attachment, my parental patterns, and so forth. It really has, over a period of time, but I mean, I am so thankful that I've found attachment based therapy.
Mhm.
I It's been a long time coming, but I mean the transformation, we'll say, has been like a 180 in terms of being able to connect with myself and others.
Mm.
I mean, our attachments at a young age, they influence every aspect of life, especially food. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah, and those feelings too, and I talk about this too in like the puberty book. They're so strong when you have these hormones, and a lot of times as we're growing up, we think something's wrong if we don't have a caregiver that's like, oh, you're feeling this, and if they don't help us manage those emotions, then we grow up and we avoid them, and so we
hmm
do all these avoidance activities. And
hmm
so as an adult, then you have to get used to, to just being okay with what you're feeling, which you know it's not, once you do it, it's like, oh, that's not so scary. I mean, maybe at first it is, but so yeah, I think, food, you can't really, I'm a dietitian, but I'm also interested in some of these. It's not just about like nutrients, it's
yeah,
also about our relationship and, you know, so I'm really interested in all these kind of different areas and how they impact
yeah.
how
The
we.
mind and body are fascinating. I know that for me, just coming back to what you said, learning to feel my body, learning to feel anxiety and depression and so forth, that was really important. But then, yeah, you're right. It becomes more normal. But yeah, so I mean, not to, I usually don't go this much in depth in my history, but yeah, my parents, they were very organized, we'll say, and so they taught me to like organize my feelings, or like channel my anxiety into productivity, we'll say.
Mhm,
But they didn't really mirror or help me relate to my difficult feelings, we'll say, sadness or
mhm,
grief or fear as a kid. And so I had no idea I even had those emotions. And so I had food struggles too, but I mean, part of this was like definitely related to childhood. And yeah, going through so many difficult emotions, if we don't have caregivers around us, it's hard for us to develop those ways of relating to our feelings.
mhm.
Oh.
Yeah.
And so um restarting, because we'll get to the puberty, I just wanted to quickly touch base upon the picky eater stage and then kind of make our way up. You mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation power. You said something about power, where parents have power, and I think you gave a good example of it, where it sounded like one kid was sort of like forced to overeat, or is not forced, but his parents kept pushing food on him. Was he in the picky eater stage when that happened?
You know what? He was an adult that I saw, so I don't remember the
I see.
details,
I see.
but I know, it can be really frustrating for parents when you have in their, especially when if they're thinner and you're afraid they're not growing. And one of the things is most babies eat almost everything. Even though they'll make a face, they still will eat, and they have a high appetite because they're in the fastest phase of growth of life. If you think about when a baby's born and 2 years later, they're like walking and
I know, it's
you
crazy.
know, so we're used to that, and as parents, we're like, "Wow, I have this great eater." Then around 2 to 3, it's different. They don't grow as fast, so they're not as hungry, and then they're more aware, so they're throwing food. Sometimes they don't even want to eat, and it drives parents crazy because all of a sudden they're a good eater, and their nutrition needs actually go down. They don't need as much iron because they're not growing as fast, and so it turns out in the table, and they're independent, and they say no, and so it's very normal to have erratic days, not eating much one day and then eating a lot the next. And it's hard for parents if you don't know why that's happening. And then that's when a lot of the food battles, like, well, you can have dessert, you know, um, if you eat some of your vegetables, because a lot of times they'll start green foods, they'll be more skeptical, so a lot of the food battles can start there. And
Mhm,
then it makes, a
mm,
lot of kids decide that they don't like healthy foods because those are the ones that are always being forced. And
mm.
then they're being rewarded with all the palatable food, and so then there starts like a dynamic that's not super healthy. And,
Some
sometimes a little bit of that. It's not like if you do that sometimes,
Sure,
if,
sure.
if it's over time and the kid, some kids can get through it and be fine, but um, it's just that stage can be really, and it can last a long time because the growth kind of stays flat for until puberty. I mean, they'll go through spurts, but and
Mm,
usually school age, they tend to start branching out more with food. And yeah, and then once they start puberty, then their appetite increases again.
This is really interesting for me to hear. Because I'll work with people who the rebellion, their inner rebel around foods is just like very powerful. And not saying that all the time 100% of a food inner conflict is because of this. Sometimes there's trauma, other times there's just crazy diets, whatever. But I could see so many people having these food battles with their parents going back, and no
Mhm.
wonder they have conflict around food. I mean, this has been ingrained upon them as a emotional family pattern for God knows how long.
Yeah, and there's a few studies, maybe like 7 or 8, that actually, they ask adults about how their childhood was, and there's, a lot of interesting. I mean, it doesn't prove cause and effect, but I'm really interested in that. Like, I just, for myself, I grew up in a big family, and when there was sweets like ice cream, my brothers would eat it if I didn't. And
Mm,
so, like, when I was an adult, I still did that. Like, oh my gosh, there's cookies, I need to, that was one thing I had to kind of be like, well, why? I can eat now, I can make the decision to eat cookies. I don't have to finish them, I can go buy them, I can drive to the store. So for me, when I was actually in my internship, I made a lot of realizations about my eating, and I ate all my meals at the hospital. So I wasn't like, I would always be mindless eating. And I don't know, I just realized like I can eat sweets in moderation. It was a
mm,
weird,
mm.
I don't know, something happened that year that changed my relationship with food. And I was, for the first time, kind of just a normal eater. I could have a couple cookies, but I still love to eat nutritious. It was just kind of the best of both worlds.
Mm.
And so that got me interested in intuitive eating, and thinking, well, why was I like that? And then as I had my own kids, I really did more research and just find it really fascinating, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, it is. And then so the next stage and your next book, we can do this a book promotion too. Just make it that way because your books so neatly parallel the stages of life. So that was we did the fearless feeding with the research based Bible for kind of everything. Then there was the picky eater stage. I have a book there from picky to powerful. But then you, as your own kids, you wrote the family dinner solution. So that was when um, your kids were growing up. Can you give us a bit of background on
Yeah, so even though
family
I'm a
dinner?
dietitian, I was never a big cook.
Mm.
Like, so when I had kids, it's like, oh my gosh, I have
Isn't
to, yeah.
cooking is you mentioned on your about page is one of what's the word you used on your about page? One
I'm
of
an
your
insecure cook.
insecure. Yeah, I think yeah, you
But I think I'm a good cook sometimes. I've
mentioned.
actually come a long way.
Cool,
But I
cool.
was forced to because I didn't marry someone who could cook. And so, like, he's good with money, and I have to do the food. um, so, like, one of the things I was try recipes and they would fail. And I think I was just out of my league. And I don't like, a lot of the recipes wouldn't even be keepers. And so, like, you buy a cookbook and you like have one recipe from that cookbook. And so I decided to revamp my whole system in the family dinner solution. It used to be what to cook for dinner with kids. And I went and on this 30-day challenge, and I tried all these recipes, and I started from what was working. So I took like 8 meals that really worked for us. And I'm like, why do those work? And I started, developing my own recipes using other, going online. And I developed a like 5-week rotation of meals that I switch out. And so I'd have it planned for 5 weeks. And, it really just changed. And I also had
Hmm.
strategies like I'd have a side strategy at my meals. So if the kids don't like, one of the biggest things for parents is you serve something new and they don't want to eat it. And then you're like, well, so if you have, a new entree, then you have side dishes. Maybe you have some raw vegetables and fruit, you have some bread. And
Hmm.
especially when they're really young, they can eat that. Like they can, and then they can learn about the new food, maybe do a learning plate. And so that way it's
Hmm.
like it keeps, they're getting food to eat, and they also have other meals,
Mhm.
lunch and breakfast. Um, so I developed a side strategy. Mexican night, we always have beans and tortillas.
Mm.
But then maybe it's shrimp, kind of like a taco where I'll rotate the protein. And so that way they're getting the exposure without having to like make them eat. And it also helped me like figure out like what works for me. So now I cook in a way that works for me. I'm not just trying to be like other people. And my cooking has just expanded. My kids are now older, not that old, and they're doing great. Like they have a really, they're not super adventurous, but they really have a good relationship with food, regulate their intake. Eventually we'll try things. Sometimes they're hesitant, but so yeah, that's really my revamping system, and it helps families create a rotation because if there's anything I've heard, it's just, even if you like to cook, it's just like oh, they just didn't eat or they complain. So you have these rules too, like no complaining allowed, respect the cook, just different things, bringing your plate up to the table, and then also in all my books I talk about the structure, having meals at the table, having regular rhythm at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and they learn listening to hunger and fullness. So always commenting on like, are you full? If they want more, say, are you hungry, or you full, so that they get used to like tuning in to how their tummy, I also wrote a children's book, What Does Your Tummy Say? But that I didn't really know what I was doing. I think it's okay, but I didn't really market it that much. But the whole idea is to teach them to tune in, and they make mistakes. Sometimes they eat too much if they're at a party, and then you could, help them find out, oh yeah, I ate too fast, or so that, so they learn kind of from their mistakes. But yeah, that book was really just,
I love that idea of
yeah,
the side rotations and not having like your whole meal be new. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean,
yeah, it really helped. It helped, like it saved kind of, I was not doing like, I wanted new recipes. So now it's like, I do this rotation and I usually
and the
print.
rotation, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, the rotation would make planning things out and easier. Um, that's a great tip. I mean, I could just imagine, like, I've never had a family, but I could imagine. I'm trying to think of my mom. She would cook food um, regularly, and we'd have dinner. And yeah, I'm just thinking about that. Like, did we have a rotation? I know that we had like pesto. We had this like chicken teriyaki, like, and we had the same meals. There was some repetition, right? There was some like her go to meals. I'm just thinking back, like what that was like. It's your conversations just bringing up memories and stuff.
Well, I
Yeah.
talked to a parent, and that was one of the things. She's like, yeah, we had fish night, we had this. And I was like, wow, that sounds so simple.
Mm,
So that's what we do. We have Mexican night and pasta, but I switch it out sometimes.
mm-hmm,
Friday fish, because we're in Lent right now.
mm-hmm,
Um, so it makes it a little bit easier, but for some people that they don't want to commit, like, so it really depends. The whole point is find something that works for you,
mm-hmm.
and build off the meals that are already working, instead of trying like
Yeah.
these out there,
And
because there's usually a reason.
I think too, like let's try a new food, but like not have the whole meal based on that new food.
Yeah, because then
Yeah.
it's like, then they go get something else, and that doesn't teach them. You want them to, a lot of times kids just need confidence. Like, I always serve when, even if like my son wouldn't eat lasagna forever, and every time it's like, here's, I would never say, yo, you're not going to eat this. I just serve
Yeah.
it every time, expecting he's going to eat it. And of course, one time he's just like, I'm like, yay, of course
Yeah.
I don't say anything, but like, and that was true with chicken. He wouldn't eat chicken forever, and he's a little more of my picky eater, but
Mm.
and at one time I'm like, oh, here's chicken. And he just started eating it one time. So it was
Huh.
like, they need to see also kids, the pickier ones, there's a range. Some kids are more adventurous, but you need to see a food, get familiar with it, and then also, as
Mm.
parents, we want them to eat it right away. But
Yeah.
sometimes for pickier kids, it can take more to work up to that bite. And even
Mhm.
when they take the bite, they may kind of throw it out, and then you think, oh,
Mm.
bummer, but that's a big step,
Mm. Mhm.
even putting it in their mouth, or
Mhm.
so I think it's just changing our mindset,
Yeah.
that we're really teaching kids to,
Uh-huh.
about food and eating, and like reading. We
Mm.
don't expect them to, a 4-year-old to read novels, but we can expect a 4-year-old to kind of eat everything at the table. And that usually is just not the case. And they go through their stages. And
Yeah.
So,
I
so
like
yeah,
the
that
idea
book
of
was
exposing kids too. Like when you can do a side thing, then not all this pressure's on the kid to eat it because he or she can have this other food that they're more comfortable with and take some of the pressure off. Like
yeah,
I
and
think
that
it's
pressure,
yeah.
like with anxiety is you kind
Mhm,
of want to remove pressure,
mhm,
and you want that exposure,
mhm.
like so it, yeah, and if
Absolutely.
you notice they're not, sometimes it can just take a while.
Mhm.
As they get older, you can actually talk to them. Do you want to taste some foods per week, or so um, there's
And
different strategies.
your daughter wasn't your daughter's the older one, and you
Mhm.
wrote a book. It's How to Raise a Mindful Eater, right? Is that the one that sort of, or oh, there's also another one, My Body's Superpower: The Girl's Guide to Growing Up Healthy During Puberty. So after the picky eater stage, there's puberty in a nutshell. Um,
Mhm.
and that's when I imagine appetite increases again. Women go through a lot more physical changes. What are some important messages that children need to hear during this stage?
Well, girls in particular, they're really at higher risk of having poor body image because girls gain fat. They need a certain amount of body fat to get their periods. So early on in puberty, they're gaining fat. And all girls are different. If they're more slender, they may gain less fat. And so, but they don't always know. They're like, oh my gosh, and they're gaining weight. It's what, 12 to 23 pounds a year versus average 5 pounds when they were not growing fast. So it's a big
Mm,
shift. And so some of these, what happens is if they don't understand, they might start to try and
mm,
diet or
mm,
skip a meal um, or just overeat because they're just like, they try and do this stuff and just can start that whole unhealthy. So body image is a really huge concern. So, looking at the research, I wanted to, um, help girls develop a positive body image, consider their eating while developing a positive body image. So, my body superpower is all about these superpowers that your body has as it's changing. So, like, there's, X-ray vision is all about learning all these important things that are happening. And, the knowledge is like X-ray vision. And then appetite signals, those are your really tuning in because they get really hungry. And if they don't listen to their appetite signals, they get loud like alarms. So it's all teaching them about that and, how they're super functioning, that, food does make a difference in how you feel.
mm.
Um, and it also then it goes into the emotional changes, the feelings, friends, because really all of that has to do too with eating habits and body image. When you don't have a supportive friend system, you might be more likely to fall into bad habits or
Mhm,
not like yourself or your body. So it goes into the physical powers and your emotional powers. And
mhm,
then there's also media literacy that I talk about, learning about, like, they also have all these images. Even if you think about COVID and
yeah,
this age group, they're on Instagram. I mean, all these images at them. When we were growing up, it was more like TV and
yeah,
movies. They have that too, but they also are on their, most of them have phones. And
mhm,
so introduces them to this idea of these unrealistic,
mm,
media messages. And so it's really supposed to, and at such an important time that it helps them, realize, that there's nothing wrong with their body. There's all these different types of bodies,
mhm.
and that they can learn how to take care of it, kind of like self-care.
What's been uh, the most, we'll say, difficult, I guess? Or you named a bunch of categories, right? Media
Mhm.
literacy, accepting a body shape, listening to hunger. What of these have been most difficult? I mean, not to pry too deeply into your own family, but what's been a struggle for you and your daughter as she goes through this time?
I think she knows, she's sometimes gets frustrated, like, when am I going to be done growing? Because she's
Mm,
not done growing. And
mm,
I can't always, like, I can just tell you what I know in general, but you kind of just got to, you're
mm,
not going to know, like, how things are going to go out. So yeah, I think, and also the media literacy. I mean, you can you got to just keep on that and because just talking about it once is not enough. You got to get in there, you got to watch the same things together and point out, make sure you answer when they have questions, don't say, oh, I can't talk right now. Like you got to, be there, because when they ask questions, I think it's just than us just telling them. But the media is really, I think they'll say, oh, it doesn't affect me, but I know it does,
Oh yeah, totally.
um,
Totally. There's been a big increase in eating disorders ever since like Facebook, basically.
yeah.
Or with
And
the rise of the internet. I think the research goes back to the internet, but basically, the last 20 years, images everywhere, photoshopping, etc.
yeah. And I think it affects everybody no matter, you know, so yeah, I think that, and just, every girl's different, and some have a harder time than others, but it's really important no matter what to make sure you're talking to your daughter about all of this,
Yeah.
how they feel, not just the changes their body, but how do they feel about these changes.
Mm.
And
Mm.
even though it's been challenging, I know, like, her having me here and talking about this,
Yeah.
we refer to the book and there's a journal that goes with it.
Yeah.
It's just helped. Like, she'll tell me,
Absolutely.
like, gosh, if I didn't have you, if I didn't know this,
Yeah.
I think she definitely would diet.
Uh-huh.
Because then she has friends, there's,
Sure.
so.
I didn't realize it was gaining 12 to 23 pounds. I could see any woman, girl who starts gaining weight, faster than usual, and this could immediately be a red signal,
Mhm.
and there's so much dieting information out there. It'd be, easy to conclude, oh, I better go on a diet. Yeah.
Yeah, and the research shows what's really interesting is that when you have a healthier body image, you're less likely
Yeah. To
your weight to
fall.
go higher. And I'm saying, this isn't all about your weight, but and you're more likely to have healthy habits, and when you like your body and you're, appreciate it, then when you start, when you don't like your body, then
Mm.
there's not a lot of motivation for healthy
Mhm.
habits in general.
Mm.
So that's kind of, it's teaching kind of nutrition through a positive body image.
Mhm.
So it's kind of tackling two different things, because a lot of people aren't necessarily motivated to eat healthy, especially like teenagers. um, so I do see that, and like my daughter really does care, about, I'm not feeling good. I think I could see her more at this stage, kind of balancing, learning how to balance her eating, because they're hanging out with their friends more and all that.
Mm.
So yeah, it's hopefully if you get through that, then the high school years
Yeah,
are.
I'm wondering too if this book in particular mentions something about we'll say different body shapes. So I used to be like a personal trainer, and that was like back when I was in, I'll say, diet mentality. I didn't know about intuitive eating. I didn't know about like these different things. But even back then, at least this was like a simplified teaching, but I do think it's kind of valuable. There were like these images of like a really petite, slender figure. Then there was like I think that was like ectomorph or something. And
Yeah.
then there was like a mesomorph, and then there's a something other. It was basically like people have different. Some people are really
Mhm.
thin, other people have bigger bones, etc. They're a bit bigger naturally. They hold more fat. Um, do you talk to children going through puberty about like their different body shapes and like kind of their genetic blueprint?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, your genetics, and I have different body shapes and talk about, everyone's different, and based on their genetics, they might be more prone to,
I think
different
it's
shapes.
such an important message. Like, yeah, like not everyone is supposed to be like pencil thin. Like, I mean, the majority of people aren't supposed to be that
Yeah.
way. I don't know, and like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not failing for having a bigger body, especially when you're at puberty. I mean, Jesus. I mean,
Well,
so
girls tend to be a little like they grow in stages. And so, in order to get their period, this is only discovered in the 70s by
hmm,
this researcher, Freach, I think. They didn't know that there was a link between body fat and period, because a lot of, some athletes, girls that were really active, wouldn't get their periods, and that's a problem. So, this researcher in the 70s, which isn't that long ago, made this connection
Hmm.
between, so girls at first, they gain body fat, and then they get their period about 2.5 years after. So a lot of their fast growth is very early in puberty. And then the last couple of years, it lasts about 4 years. They mostly grow in height. So they're kind of out of proportion. Like they're in that like in between stage. So that alone can really, at least if they know, look, I'm kind of in this in between, and we also, like, one study showed that metabolism will slow down. I mean, if you think about it, the body's doing all this work, and it does, it's one of those just big changes where boys tend to grow later in puberty. So they don't have that, like, so that's another thing. Girls are growing really fast and all the boys are like a lot smaller than them. And then in high school, the boys but boys will keep growing till like 18, 19, sometimes 20, where girls usually stop around 16.
Mm.
So, it's, if, and the research shows the earlier you go through puberty as a girl, the more problematic. It's more, it's hard. If you're one of the first ones, they're more likely to have eating issues. And boys tend to be the ones that go through it much later. So if the guy stays small, boys tend to like puberty early.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, it's a tricky area. And I usually write for parents, and I wrote a whole series on my blog for parents, but then I just wanted this book to be for the adolescent girl, and then I'll do for boys. So.
Yeah. And then as your kids get older, previously, before this recorded conversation, I think we talked about how your next exploration book exploration, I feel like every book for you is an exploration. But anyways, your next book exploration is kind of tackling midlife struggles. And what are you learning so far on your adventure?
Well, I've learned a lot just for myself. I used to have anxiety, like symptoms, and like in my around 46, 47, they just came back with a vengeance.
Really?
And this is actually what I've learned is this is extremely common symptom of perimenopause is anxiety. But there's also a lot of nutrition related factors. I was deficient in iron. I didn't know. That's very common, and doctors don't check. They'll check for anemia, but not iron deficiency. And so I'm learning a lot about, once you get to this point, some of it is hormonal changes, but other stuff is just some, nutrition deficiencies, or, just inadequate nutrition. That, if you're, I work out a lot. There's all these things with iron. So, it's interesting I haven't really been thinking of myself because I was focused on kids, but there's just a lot of women will gain weight during this time. You tend to lose lean body mass, which plays a role. And then a lot of women, like people will start dieting. But here's the thing, once you're getting older, I mean, I'm not a big fan of dieting in general, but, when you lose weight with a diet, you lose 1/4 of your muscle mass. And so with age, you're already losing muscle mass. You also can lose some of your bone. And so I recently had a bone scan because, so it really, you have to be really careful. And it's really, about taking care, feeding yourself, dieting and all that is just the opposite of really what your body needs.
Yeah.
At midlife. And the problem is most doctors just don't, because there's that big study on hormone replacement in 2002 that came out and said it's associated with cancer and heart disease. And I think prescriptions went down 80%.
Oh, geez.
And really, there's very little in medical school about midlife. This is a whole life stage that's almost ignored. So a lot of people will go to alternative medicine, and they can help, and it just depends. I think if you find someone really good or research-based. But it's just, I don't know, it's a whole, I'm not even halfway through writing it. And then a lot of emotional stuff comes up. It all because like our hormones changing, and then just any unresolved emotional stuff, just, I think for me, that was part of it,
The
luckily I
anxiety?
had anxiety before. I know what to do.
Mm,
I found I'm really doing well with that.
mm,
Um, but yeah, it's a time to kind of put some of these struggles you've had, face them, and move on to this next stage that I think is a really cool stage, because most women and men, you kind of know what you want, you have this experience, but then you don't feel right. And for me,
mm.
eating well and exercise and taking care of myself, I mean, I want to feel good as I get older. Um, so yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't know. There's just a lot of stuff. I write on my blog kind of what I find, not everything, because it's, going to be in the book. And I'm not sure how I might do several books because there's so much information. It teaches women about how do their hormones change, why they change. Instead of just the typical perimenopause, there's actually something called very early
What is
perimenopause.
what is I've heard of menopause for sure.
Mhm.
Did you use para the other time?
Perimenopause.
Peri, is that like post or pre or
Yeah, it's the stage like between, just being regular and then transitioning to menopause. But
I see.
research is showing that changes happen much earlier, like your late 30s, early
Hmm,
40s, that even though women's cycles will be regular, they're sometimes they're producing too much estrogen. There's already some like
hmm,
imbalances. So a lot of women will like for me, I had anxiety or they'll have some brain fog or just different symptoms.
hmm,
And they go to their doctor and the doctor's like, everything's fine,
hmm,
but they just don't feel right.
hmm,
And so I'm interviewing lots of experts to help women understand
hmm.
how their body's changing so they can make the right decisions because how they proceed,
So some of your anxiety that recently flared up, this was sort of a hormonal thing you're thinking?
I think it's part that I think some of it because having low iron can affect
Hmm.
that. Um, I think
I
it
had
was.
anemia too back in the day. I know, but interestingly enough, you said that it sounded like anemia and low iron were not related. I guess you could have low iron, but not to the threshold of anemia.
Yeah, so what happens is you have iron stores and usually ferritin, that's a
Yeah,
level they
that sounds
contain, that's
familiar.
your iron store. So that depletes first. And once that's all the way depleted and it's depleted from your cells and tissues too, then you get anemia is like the final stage.
Mm,
So there's a lot of symptoms that women get like palpitations or anyone with a low iron.
mhm,
Um, and they'll go to the doctor and they'll be like, I don't see anything. And then also ferritin, there's not it's usually 30 or less is low iron or iron deficiency, but some labs will say that's normal. So then we have, a woman or you may get your ferritin checked and some will say it's normal, but I've read these studies where 50 or anything 50 or less can cause symptoms. If you have symptoms and your ferritin's 50 or less, and I just wrote about this, um, you should probably take some iron, especially if
mm,
you're one of you're an athlete, you exercise a lot, you have heavy periods for sure. Almost 100% of women with heavy periods have low iron.
mm,
Um, and, if you had back to back pregnancies, that will also lower your iron.
mm.
So I think a lot of women heading into midlife have low iron. I'm
Probably.
not saying all of them, but
I know
so
my
it causes a
mom.
lot of the same symptoms like brain fog and it can be related to anxiety. I don't think it causes it, but if you think about it, if you can't get oxygen, you might like be a little short of breath, and that can be a symptom.
Mm.
You might just feel a little agitated. Um, so I think it's
And I know there's also osteoporosis, right? That affects women. I'm not sure more than men. I think my mom takes, is it calcium for that? Uh,
vitamin D and calcium.
vitamin D and calcium. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is they don't check your bones until like 65.
Ah,
But
huh.
I think one research study showed people in their 40s, it was like 30 or
Ah,
40% were at risk, had like osteopenia.
huh.
Um, and that's a stage before osteoporosis.
Mm,
So, yeah, I think they should be, you should go to the doctor and they should be
mm.
checking for this stuff,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
so that, what you can do
Absolutely.
to help. But yeah, like your bones, and after menopause, you have a really rapid, you lose bone really fast. So it's important to know before menopause how your bones are doing, keeping really making sure you're getting enough calcium, vitamin D, and calories. So yeah, and people that are thinner are more risk for osteoporosis, because weight bearing helps, whether that's from your weight or from doing, exercise that helps your bones stay strong.
Got you. And just to kind of summarize, like how like the practical steps you've taken to deal with anxiety. I know probably other people have been going through their own anxieties of
Mhm.
whatever sort in midlife. Obviously, this podcast is aimed at people who are, I'd say, adults. So I'm sure, and
Mhm.
there's a spiritual side too. I mean, so
Yeah.
maybe this I wish I could tell the demographics of the people listening. If you're out there listening, you could email me. um, but anyways, summarizing, like, so you've had some anxiety recently flare up. How are you dealing with it, managing it?
Well, I did see a therapist, and I asked for like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, but
Oh yeah, that's what I do.
yeah,
Anyways, that's what I love. That's what I
asked
love. I
them,
love CBT.
yeah,
That's my thing
but I think that wasn't what I really needed for this.
for sure. Yeah.
I think part of it too was I lost a lot of people when my
Mm,
kids were little, and my like family, my father-in-law, like people died,
mm,
and I didn't really process it because I had two young kids, and so
mm,
this stuff happened. We lost people, and I lost my dad when I was 13, and so that's like I don't know. I think I didn't process that. So
yeah.
part of it was me dealing with that, you know,
Yeah.
finally crying. And I think when the anxiety came back, I wasn't that busy. I quit my job and did do what I do now at home full time. My kids were a little older, and I all of a sudden this time, and it was like everything just came.
Yeah. I see.
But what really helped from like, I don't know if you've heard of this program. It's called the DARE program, and
Can
it's really
go
all
on.
like exposure kind
Mm,
of therapy. DARE is a acronym for, I think, you can look it up online, like diffuse your thoughts, accept, and allow. So when you're having these feelings, our gut tells us just to avoid them,
mm,
and like, so what you do with like a program like DARE, just in general, is you
mm,
welcome them. You
mm,
say, "Come, anxiety, I accept." And I would have it when I was driving. So then you start avoiding driving, right? So then, like, the anxiety's in control. So, what it says is drive, maybe take small steps. But I would drive and I just say, bring it on. I want more. And it just would dissolve away.
mm.
Like, so the DARE program is, it's all about kind of exposure therapy is what they use in like clinical sense. Um, but this program's it's pretty amazing. They have a Facebook page, and if you do it, you'll get a free app. There's a book. But it was really about not being afraid of the feelings and the sensations.
Mm.
And and that was really for just like the driving in some little things. And it's a form of CBT, but it's not where you're writing down your thoughts and challenging them. And now I'm just so very aware of that fear part of me,
Mhm.
and I just kind of like, oh, there it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I'm feeling it, it's like, okay, I want more. And it kind of like you're calling its bluff.
It's
And
sometimes
then,
I think of, like, when kids are young and like 15 minutes is like the longest thing, or like an hour wait, they're just like, ah,
yeah,
I can't. They're just like, they don't. I feel like that's sometimes when we get better with like in dealing with anxiety and these difficult things, it's like what was difficult to sit through is now like able to, we're able to get through it. Okay.
yeah, it's being able to tolerate like your feelings, really. When you have anxiety, it's, you know, you want to just flee. I mean, that's the whole thing. You want to get
Yeah.
out of there. But
Or
if you
quit
just
it.
like, okay, it's um so that I didn't really do that before as much when I
Yeah.
had of course, like the heart palpitations is can be anxiety, because when you have more adrenaline, your heart might skip a beat because of the adrenaline. Like,
Mhm.
um So when I first got it, when I was like 30, I went to a cardiologist and they did like a full, I didn't know what it was. Now, like when it happened, I knew, but a lot of women, if they have anxiety, and it's very common in midlife, they don't really know. And it's very scary. And then it's like, I'm having a heart attack. And I kind of knew I had that, so that was an advantage, is when it's just like with all the life stage, what to expect. It's not as scary.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure the ER, they get a lot of panic attacks, and I don't really have full blown panic attacks. It was just more increased heart rate. And that also, is a, perimenopause symptom. It's just the hormones can affect, your nervous system. And it's, it's a complex, it's not like this causes this, but it's definitely plays a role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love hearing your vulnerability. Thank you for sharing, like,
Mhm.
the kind of the grieving process you went through therapy, and learning to deal with some of these difficult things, daring to deal with
Yeah.
these difficult things.
Because
As
really
we,
anxiety keeps you from living your life. Like, that's what
yeah,
it does. And it's once
it
you
does.
kind of like, you're spending all this time on things that aren't, it's one thing
Yeah.
if it's, I think in one book, it's like a signal versus a noise. I mean, sometimes we get anxiety because something's really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's just a bunch of noise, we can't listen. You just kind of, oh, that's noise.
Yeah. As we wrap up today, I wanted to have you say where people can contact you, where people can find you online. And
Well, there's my website, Maryann Jacobsen, EN.com, or you can get there through Raise Healthy Eaters. And, I have a newsletter I send out like once a month. I have a podcast, a Healthy Family podcast, and you can see all my books there. They're also on Amazon. The How to Raise a Mindful Eater, that one was really, I got a lot of emails from parents that their child was obsessed with food. And so I wrote that book for those parents because I got that question so much. And so that's probably one of my best-selling books, because it deals with all the different. It's a great book for parents to read. So yeah, that didn't fall in the normal like developmental, but yeah. So my website and podcast, and then for midlife, I have a specific sign up list. Probably going to start a Facebook private page for that, so I can, use those stories from women, and because it's.
Yeah, thank you, Maryann Jacobsen. The links will be down below. Links will be down below if you're listening or watching. Links will be down below, so you can check out Maryann. And then, Maryann, what's your definition of enlightenment? How do you define enlightenment? What does enlightenment mean to you?
I think it's living the life you want.
I like it.
Living the life and you feel that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, instead of kind of being like, like I was saying with anxiety, like that doesn't, when you're engaging in that's the opposite. You're kind of a victim. But when you're finally get the courage to just like really do the things you just feel in your kind of gut, or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
That feels free,
I love it. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Jared. Fun.
All right. Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It really does mean the world to me. And be sure to check out the Eating Enlightenment journaling app on iTunes and iOS. It's also available on my website at eatingenlightenment.com. But try it out. Download the app, start today, because it's pretty simple and quick to get the hang of this really simple guideline. Journal before you eat, journal with awareness before you eat. Write out your thoughts and feelings in the app before you eat. Do that. You will see results right away. You will start rethinking and changing your eating decisions. You won't binge as much if you write stuff down. It's that simple. I want you to try it for yourself. want you to go to the iOS store right now while it's fresh on your mind. While it's fresh on your mind, go to the iOS store right now, download the Eating Enlightenment app or Android, or go to eatingenlightenment.com. It's right on the front page. Download the app. Give it a shot before your next meal. You can start today. You can literally start writing your thoughts and feelings out on paper, getting those neural connections established from your feeling body to your mind. You can start building those neural pathways, which are going to help you change your eating habits in a really practical way. You'll see changes right away. You will realize that the unhealthy food right in front of you is, you don't even want it. You realize, why am I even going towards it? Why am I grabbing towards it? You'll put it away. You'll move on with your day. You'll be more present with others because you got those thoughts out of your head. Even if they're crazy thoughts, you got them out of your head onto paper, and now you can be more present with people because your mind is more free. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going on a ramble, but the point is, if you struggle with food, and let's be honest here, some of you listening do, that's okay. If you're a creative person, you like expressing yourself via the written word, right? This journaling thing isn't for everyone, but if you struggle with food and you're a creative person on one side, or you're highly organized, extremely hard worker, and logical on the other side, the journal is meant for those folks, and those folks love the journal. Highly organized people are able to finally struggle to get their feelings out on paper, but writing is something that they can do. It's natural to them. And then the organized person who's maybe more chaotic is actually able to put structure to their thoughts and feelings around food. It's just a amazing practice that can honestly change your life. That will change your life. The more you commit to this, the more you understand this. So, you know what to do, and stay tuned for the next episode coming up.